The HBO series Succession has been widely lauded as the best show on TV. Critics and video essayists alike have been praising the series for its phenomenal dialogue, its Emmy Award-winning performances, and its unflinching portrayals of abuse. But there's one thing I haven't seen discussed much, and it's probably because the show doesn't discuss it very much at all. And it's how the inner dynamics of Royco are so highly pressurised because this corporation runs the world. I mean, I'm not surprised it hasn't been discussed very much. The show itself doesn't discuss it very much. However, it's important to realise that this scenario is so pressurised because whoever succeeds Logan can effectively choose the next president, next prime minister. They have the power to shape public opinion so much that they can choose whether the country goes to war. Despite the complicated inner dynamics of the family, part of the reason that 3 children warring over succession are so wholeheartedly dedicated to taking over the company is because whoever rules Waystar can reshape the world in their image. Succession, while fiction, is very much based on the most powerful man in the Western world. This man has been instrumental in reshaping the free market economy, he's helped the rise of modern fascism, and he's even convinced states to go to war. This man owns Western democracy despite never being elected to any form of office. I am talking about Rupert Murdoch. The Murdoch dynasty began with Australian journalist Keith Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch's father is possibly best known for his letter about the Gallipoli disaster, in which he said the British essentially treated the Australian soldiers as disposable. Some other Keith highlights include he collaborated with Joseph Lyons to overcome regulatory restrictions which allowed him to make a right-wing radio station in exchange for Keith getting Lyons elected Prime Minister of Australia. Keith was also a member of the Eugenics Society in Adelaide and once wrote an editorial that Britain should fight for a white Australia. After Keith died, Rupert took control of a lot of British tabloids such as The Sun and more respectable right-wing papers like The Times. Murdoch said he succeeded because he brought sex to the stuffy British public. When he says sex, he means misogyny. This man just sees women as tits. Once he had control of British newspapers, he moved to New York to take on US television. Margaret Thatcher gave him Sky TV after he helped to get her elected. According to the New York Times, the Reagan administration's elimination of the Fairness Doctrine, which had for decades required broadcasters to present both sides of any major public policy debate, spawned a new generation of right-wing radio personalities who were free to provide a different sort of opinion programming to a large, latent conservative audience that was mistrustful of the media in general. If Murdoch's papers were a blunt instrument, Fox's influence was in some ways more subtle, but also far more profound. Hour after hour, day after day, it was shaping the realities of millions of Americans who treated it as their primary news source. In 2011, Murdoch's empire came under scrutiny due to the phone hacking scandal that led to the shutdown of his newspaper, The News of the World. At the centre of this case was the murder of 13-year-old Millie Dowler. Dowler was murdered in March 2002. However, her remains weren't found until September. During that time, Murdoch's company hacked her phone and deleted some voicemails, messages from her grieving parents begging her to come home alive. This led the police investigating Dowler's disappearance to believe she was still alive since she appeared to still have access to her phone. Apart from just losing one of his many tabloid newspapers and leaving the UK for a while, there were no real consequences for this serious crime. Rupert Murdoch tampered with the murder investigation of a child and basically just went on holiday. He triumphantly returned in 2016 after masterminding the Brexit vote. That year he also allied himself to Trump and helped secure his victory. Over the course of 5 months, one man had completely reshaped Western politics, and he did this all after murdering in the murder investigation of a child. The inner workings of Waystar Royco can easily be compared to a cult. Cults want people who are intelligent and motivated, those who will work hard and not worry about pesky things like not getting enough sleep. Cult leaders force their members to submit fully to their control by breaking down a follower's ability to think critically. Much of Season 1 revolves around Kendall attempting to oust his father, Logan Roy, as CEO of Waystar. It seems promising. Kendall manages to garner support from key company members Frank and Jerry, as well as a tacit allegiance with the more morally ambiguous Stewie and Kendall's own younger brother Roman. What transpires is typical of cult development. A threat to the leader ends up only strengthening his hold over his followers and heightening Logan's paranoia. I want to focus on the vote of no confidence scene. I think the direction of this scene and the scene's wider meaning are interesting when considering how Logan maintains his grip over his staff. The vote of no confidence takes place in the typical corporate scene of a modern conference room, equipped with shiny metallic furnishings. We all know the grey colour scheme of modern offices symbolises that profit is prioritised over humanity. That's just a given. What I want to focus on is the fact that the conference room is made of glass. Everyone that works on that floor will literally be able to see the drama. Yet, that doesn't seem to matter. Logan's physical presence is enough to shock Stewie and Roman into silence. And even though Kendall is physically absent from the space, you get the impression that even if you were in the room, the coup would likely still fail because Kendall simply does not have the same presence as his father. And even though Kendall is physically absent from the space, you get the impression that even if you were in the room, the coup would still fail because Kendall simply does not have the same presence as his father. What's more cult-like than that? Logan has such a hold on this room of intelligent people that they are willing to blindly follow or acquiesce to his will. The cult-like aspect of the inner circle of Waystar extends to the company's wider audience. In the show, Waystar owns a Fox News-type company named ATN. Through hostile networking that implies an enemy is always attempting to attack its viewership, whether that attacker be the LGBT community, immigrants or higher taxes, ATN essentially creates a cult-like following amongst its loyal viewers. Think about it. Fox News and conservative anchors like Ben Shapiro always imply that if marginalised groups get more rights, then their viewers will have fewer rights. An obvious example of this would be the immigrants taking your job rhetoric. And considering that 40% of Fox News viewers say it's their only source of news, it means that the media moguls have built a cult in which the reactionary, insecure messaging becomes a philosophy for its dedicated followers. All this political fallout is fueled by one company whose cult-like grip on the inner circle has split into a never-ending culture war that has a devastating impact on democracy. As friends of the Murdochs used to say, Murdoch didn't raise children, he raised future media moguls. When thinking about the character of Logan Roy, I think it's important to consider that he is fueled by narcissism. According to DSM-5, there are 9 traits associated with narcissistic personality disorder, almost all of which we can see in Logan Roy. So since I'm trying to keep this video short, I'm just going to run through the list of traits so you understand what I mean when I say Logan Roy is probably a narcissist. 1. Grandiose self-sense importance. 2. Preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty or ideal love. 3. Belief they are special and unique and can only be understood by, or should associate with, other special or high-status opinions and institutions. 4. Need for excessive admiration. 5. Sense of entitlement. 6. Interpersonally exploitative behaviour. 7. Lack of empathy. 8. Envy of others or a belief others are envious of them. 9. Demonstration of haughty behaviours or attitudes. Logan Roy's narcissistic grip on the company is fueled by his obsession to remake the world in his image. And how does he ensure that the world retains his worldview after he steps down? Well, he tries to make sure his children keep running the company the way he would. After all, Waystar, like Murdoch's News Corp, has the power to shape Western democracy. Logan Roy's narcissistic grip on the company is fueled by his obsession to remake the world in his image. And how does he ensure that the world retains his worldview after he steps down? Well, he tries to make sure his children keep running the company the way he would. After all, Waystar, like Murdoch's News Corp, has the power to shape Western democracy. For Logan, like many narcissistic parents, children aren't complete people. They're extensions of himself. He arguably has so many of them because 1. Connor wasn't the ambitious kid he dreamed of, and 2. Because children are symbolic of his virility. In a previous version of the script, I had a whole bit about succession as a Freudian wet dream, but my brother gave me a cold, and now I perforated eardrum, so I've had to deal with enough dickheads this week. Interestingly, Kendall does not appear to be a narcissistic parent. I'd even argue his parenting is the opposite of his dad's because he always appears incredibly concerned with his children's needs as individuals. Even the existence of Sophie, Kendall's eldest child, shows he doesn't regard his children as clones of himself, as Sophie is adopted. I doubt Logan would ever adopt a child because much of his obsession with controlling Kendall, Shiv and Roman is based around the fact that they are his flesh and blood. Logan Roy would never adopt a child for the sake of having someone to love. But the thing is, Logan has no respect for Kendall because he shows emotion. For Logan, loving a child is weakness. Children only exist to continue his legacy. That's how Logan runs the world. He tries to clone himself in his children, offering him the absolute power afforded to the CEO of Waystar. But only if they run it just like him.
And Jesse, what guiding principle try to tell the truth, try to follow the characters, how we think they would react to the situations. That's always the lodestar, and hopefully, if you believe in the people enough and we get the detail right, that's interesting.
Spoilers for the first episode of season 3. Most of the opening episode concerns the consequences of Kendall's decision to sell out his dad at the end of season 2. Kendall then spends the first episode of season 3 building a battle plan, but his plan isn't to destroy Waystar, just his father. Kendall still believes if he took over the company, then Waystar could be a force for good. Side note, at one point Kendall talks about how Cruz attacked women and minorities, but also manages to get in a dig about how much he hates fat people. It's just fucking typical thin leftism, isn't it? We care about equality. Unless you're fat, then you can just die. He also does that bullshit fat equals greedy comparison to imply fat people are the problem with capitalism. Like, no babes, it's thin twats like you that spend billions of pounds on fucking keto diets. Alright? Do better. Much of season 2 is concerned with gender. After a senior figure in the company dies suddenly, a culture of sex crimes, assault, and even murder aboard Waystar's cruise lines is uncovered. Spoilers again, first episode of season 3, but Logan effectively concludes that the way to tackle this crisis is by putting women at the head of Waystar and change nothing else. In response to Sheryl Sandberg's liberal feminist book Lean In, philosopher Bell Hooks wrote, "Founded on the principles of white supremacy and the structure to maintain it, the rites of passage in the corporate world mirror this aspect of our nation." That aspect being white supremacy and misogyny. Hooks also focuses on what she calls the benevolent patriarchal imperialism implied by the idea that women should run the world. At the end of the day, women in positions of power function the same way that men in positions of corporate power do. They maintain the oppressive power structures that create such a hierarchy in the first place. At the end of the day, if Shiv became the new CEO, she would have very little power to change the misogyny inherent within Waystar because of how embedded these practices are within the corporation. If Waystar exposed the whole truth of the Cruiser scandal and their many other crimes, such as Kendall's vehicular manslaughter, then the company would lose massive amounts of power. Logan's main response to the Cruiser scandal is to cover it up with woman CEO so that the shareholders in the company don't withdraw their money. He also makes sure Tom destroys the legal documents that prove wrongdoing, because a criminal investigation could lead to, at the very least, massive changes to Waystar's inner workings, and at the very worst, the company being completely shut down and Logan serving jail time. What we're left with is the realisation that Waystar cannot be reformed, because if it did so, then the company would lose massive amounts of power. As long as Waystar runs exactly the same way, then it can continue to mould the world in their image. If Kendall and any potential allies really want to change Waystar, they're going to have to destroy it. Succession is an interesting series. In many ways, the show had to be a fictional story that was only inspired by the Murdochs. We wanted to create characters with any form of sympathy. For example, many critics have likened Kendall to James Murdoch, as James has been known amongst the Murdoch clan for being a Democrat who wants to reform his father's conservative company. But James Murdoch was also the face of the phone hacking scandal. Just to reiterate, James Murdoch helped the News of the World tamper with the investigation into a child murder. James Murdoch also took dinner with Ivanka Trump when her father was running for president. He was a staunch Hillary Clinton supporter, but he was also willing to meet with the Trumps because of the power it could give him within News Corp. The show may also not have lent into the more political aspects of Rupert Murdoch's power because they may seem unbelievable. In the UK, this man's papers decide who becomes Prime Minister. At least since Thatcher's election in 1979, it's been a constant rule. Whoever the son endorses becomes Prime Minister. The only reason Rupert Murdoch allowed Labour into office in 1997 was because Tony Blair met with Murdoch himself. That's democracy. A MP must ask some fucking guy for permission to be Prime Minister. Some random guy no one elected owns British democracy, and that's not going to change anytime soon. It will be interesting to see where season 3 takes us. We could either have a slightly more hopeful narrative where Kendall succeeds in usurping his father, but realises Waystar must be destroyed in the process. However, considering the tone of the show so far, I think it's more likely that Kendall's civil war will fail. Logan will maintain his power over Waystar and the world at large. Maybe Rowan will end up becoming CEO purely because he would never have the balls to run it any differently than Logan. The new CEO won't really matter because Waystar will only exist in its current form as long as Logan is in charge.